Hello everyone, welcome back. So in today's session, we'll break down the powerful concept called constructors. So in this session, we are going to discuss what is constructor and what are the characteristics of the constructor and what are the differences between constructor and method and various types of constructor also we are going to discuss and how to use constructors in overloading as well as inheritance. These are the concepts we are going to discuss. So when we come to the definition of the constructor, what is a constructor here? So as we know, the constructor is a special method in Java that is used to initialize the object. So which is similar to a method, but we can call this as a special category of the method. And especially whenever we are used to initialize the object and we are going to use the constructor for the initialization purpose. It is called automatically. The constructors are called automatically when the object is created. And also the constructor name must match with the class name and it has no written type or even void also we are not going to write here. The constructor should not have any written type, and also whatever the class name we have, the same class, same method name if we use, then we can call it as a constructor. So when we come to the characteristics of the constructor, as whatever the class name we have, the method name is also the same, that is same name as the class name, and we should not have any written type and automatically invoked when the object is created, and that can be whatever the type of parameter we have, that can be either parameterized or non-parameterized constructor we can use here. Java provides the default constructor if nothing was specified. If no constructor is called, the Java user to call the default constructor by itself. At the time of calling the constructor, whenever we are calling the constructor, the memory is going to be allocated based on the requirement. That means at the time of calling the constructor, memory for the object is allocated in the memory, so that whatever the members we have in that particular constructor, that members are going to, for that members the memory is going to be assigned here. It is a special type of method which is used for initialize the object, and every time an object is created, in general, the object is going to be created with the help of a keyword called new keyword, and at least one constructor is going to be called when we are using new keyword in that to create the object. It calls the default constructor if no constructor is available in the class, as we said now. So in such cases, the Java compiler provides the default compiler by the default. If it is called, we are calling this as a constructor, or the special method we are calling this as, because it constructs the values at the time of object creation, and it is also not necessary to write the constructor for the class if because the compiler creates the default constructor if the class does not have any. That means if you are not writing or if you are not using any constructor in the Java program, the Java compiler consider the default constructor by itself, and if you write any constructor that may be default or that may be parameterized constructor, then whatever the constructor we wrote, that constructor is going to be used here. When we come to the constructor versus method, what are the basic difference between the constructor and method? If you observe, the when we compare the constructor and the method, the constructor must have the same name as the class and which is defined. It is not necessary for the method in Java. Means we may have the method name as the class name or the different name we can use here. If we use the same name, then we can call it as a constructor, and if we are using other name, we can call it as a method. So for the constructor, it is mandatory to have the same name as the class name, but not in the case of method. So the constructors, in the case of constructors, we should not have any written type, but methods may have written type like void, integer, character, float, double, any written type we can use here. In the case of constructors are called only once at the time of object creation, but the methods can be called any number of times. So these are the basic differences between the constructor and the method. That means the difference number one, for the constructor, the class name is same as the method name, then we can call that as constructor, but in the case of methods, it is not mandatory. The second difference is the constructors do not have any written type here, but the methods may have the written type. Third difference, the constructors are called only once at the time of object creation, and while the methods we may call any number of times. That is the basic difference between the constructor and method. So in general, the basic purpose of the constructor is to initialize the object, and in the case of method, to perform some kind of operations, we are going to use the methods. So while writing the constructor, we need to follow some set of rules here. Rule 1, the name same as the class name, and number 2, The constructor in Java should not be static or final and synchronized. The third difference is can be used in constructor declaration, because with this we can control it access, which the other class can call the constructor. So these are the rules we need to follow for the constructor. And in the next section, the type of constructors we have. So basically there are three types of constructors which are supported by Java. One is called default constructor, and then second one is called parameterized constructor. The third one is copy constructor. Default constructor, parameterized constructor, and copy constructor. When we come to the default constructor, if we don't define any constructor inside the class, the Java is going to create one for us that is called default constructor. So a constructor that has no parameters is also known as default constructor. The default constructor, it is invisible constructor we can call, and if you write the constructor with no arguments, that compiler does not create the default constructor. As it is taken, whatever the constructor we are writing, that is going to be considered. If we are not specified any constructor, then Java is going to have its own default constructor that is to be called when an object is created. So it is being overloaded and can be called as a parameterized constructor. The default constructor changed into parameterized constructor, but the parameterized constructor cannot be changed into default constructor. Remember this point. The default constructor is used to provide the default values to the object like 0, null, etc. Depending on the type of the variable, it is going to have some default values. If you consider the example, the class name is student here, and I'm calling the method called student. As we can see, the class name is student and the method name is student, so we can call this as a constructor. And there are no parameters here, we can call this as a default parameter. So when we are defining the student method to print some message called constructor code, then we are writing the main class here, constructor demo, main method, and for this student class, I'm going to create an object here. Class name student s1 is equal to new student. So when this object is created, it is going to call the constructor. As this is a constructor, when s1 is going to be created, when s1 is the object s1 is created, then the compiler is going to call this default constructor method. So that's why we are going to get the output of this particular message, constructor called. When we run this code, as you can see, the constructor is called. We are not calling any method here. In the case of method, we need to create an object, and with the help of that object, we need to create the method name. For example, here the method name is student1, then we need to write s1 dot student1 so that this particular method is going to be executed. But in this case, as we have a constructor here, when this object is created, at that time only the constructor is going to be called. If we take one more example, so I'm keeping in comment lines here. So if we consider this example, the class name is book here, and I'm declaring one variable called title as a string variable, and I'm writing the method book. The class name is book and the method name is book, so that we can call this as a default constructor. So I'm assigning some value title equal to Java basics. Then we also write one more method called show, as the class name is book here and the method name is show, as the name is not same, then we can call this as a method here. So we are printing some message here. Then I'm writing the main class, constructor demo, and main method. And for book, I'm creating object here. So this is a class. For this class, I'm creating object here. So that whatever the object we have, with the help of that object, we can access all the members. So b dot show, we are calling this method. As this object is, when this object is created, it is going to call the constructor equal to Java basics. It was assigned here. Then b dot show, when this method is called, this method is going to be called here. So it is going to print the title. So when we run this code, title equal to Java basics. So like this, we can have any default constructor here. So when we come to the second type of constructor called parameterized constructor, The constructor means the class name and method name is same, and parameterized the constructor with the parameters. So if we have any number of parameters in the constructor, then we can call that as a parameterized constructor. That means when the object is created, we are going to pass some arguments here. So when you are passing the arguments to the constructor to initialize the values dynamically, then we can call that as a parameterized constructor. A constructor that has parameters is known as parameterized constructor, as we said now. If you want to initialize the fields of that particular class with our own values, then we are going to use the parameterized constructor. As there is no return type, uh, we need to have in the constructor, but the constructor returns the current class instance. So we can write return inside the constructor. No need to specify any return type here, as we are not having any return type for this constructor, but the constructor returns the current class instance, as we can write return inside the constructor. But no need to specify any return type like methods. If we consider the example, so if we consider the parameterized constructor example, as you can see, the class name is employee, and we are using two variables here, string name and integer id. Then I'm writing the parameterized constructor employee, string n, and integer I, and I'm doing some kind of instantiation. Name equal to n and id equal to I. Whatever the values we are passing from the main code, that values we are assigning into the constructor, that is called name as well as the id. Here, the class name is employee and the method name is also employee, as we can call this as a parameterized constructor we are passing. And one method we are writing here, display. I want to display id as well as name here. Then main method, constructor, demo is the class name, main method I am writing. For employee, we are creating object here. At the time of creating object, we are passing some values here. So employee E1, E1 is the object here, new employee, Ravi, comma 101. So we are passing these values into this corresponding constructor. So Ravi is passed to N and 101 is passed to I. In turn, these values are passed to name and ID. Ravi is passed to name and ID, 101 is passed to ID. Then E1.display, this method we are calling here, it is going to print ID as well as name. So if you run this code, as you can see, ID equal to 101 and name equal to Ravi. When we come to the copy constructor, copy, as the Java does not have a built-in copy constructor, but we can define it manually. So copy constructor is passed with another object which copies the data available from the passed object to the newly created object. That means if you want to pass the values or if you want to transfer the values of one constructor to another constructor, then we are going to have the copy constructor. That means we are going to create an object, and with the help of that object, we are going to copy the values of one constructor to another constructor. There are many ways in copying the values of one object to another object in Java. That may be either by using constructor we can do, or by assigning the values of one object to another object we can do, or by cloning also we can do. There are in these any one of the methods we can use to copy the content of one object to another object, either by the help of constructor or by assigning the value of one object to another, or by a clone method we can do. If we consider the example, the class name is person and string name we are declaring one variable here, and this is called parameterized constructor, string n and name equal to n, and person p, name equal to p dot name. This is called copy constructor, and we are writing one method called show. Then in this case, what is going to happen is, once we assign the n value to name, what is the person? Again, the class name is person here and the method name is person. This is also parameterized constructor, and the class name is person, method name is person. Here also we are passing one argument here, name equal to p dot name. So whatever the name we are passing show, then whatever the name we are passing, that name is initially called with the help of this parameterized constructor. Then I'm using the copy constructor. Then the value is going to be passed from one object to another object. Next, how we are going to use the constructor overloading. It means overloading. We need to overload the constructor. That means we are going to have multiple constructors with different parameters. Like method overloading, we can have the like method overloading, we can have the constructor overloading. That means we are going to define the multiple constructors based on the number of parameters in the same class. The constructor is just like a method, but without any return type. It can also be overloaded like other Java methods. So that concept we can call this as a constructor overloading. Simply, in simple words, if you say, the constructor overloading in Java is a technique of having more than one constructor with different parameters lists. They are arranged in a way that each constructor performs a different task based on number of parameters, and based on the values we are passing from the main code, the corresponding constructor is going to be called. So as we have multiple constructors are there, they are going to be differentiated based on the number of parameters and the list of parameters and the type of parameters we passed into the constructor. Then we can call it as a constructor overloading. If you consider the example here, so class name is rectangle, two variables I am taking here, and this is default constructor, rectangle, length equal to 10, width equal to 5, and this is parameterized constructor, length equal to L and width equal to 5 we are passing here. Then two parameters we are passing with the same class name, rectangle, integer L, width, length and width we are passing here. That means if nothing was passed, default constructor is going to be called. If length is passed, this constructor is going to be called. If two values are passed, this constructor is going to be called. Then I want to print the area here. There is a method we are writing here. Then the class name is constructor demo, main method I am writing. I am creating object here. Rectangle R1 is equal to new rectangle. When this object is created, what is going to happen? It is going to call the default constructor. Then length equal to 10, width equal to 5 here. Then rectangle R2 equal to new rectangle 7. One argument is passed, so this method is going to be called. In this case, length equal to 7 and width equal to 5. Now rectangle R3 is equal to new rectangle 4, 6. Two arguments are passed here. This constructor is going to be called here. In this case, length equal to 4 and width equal to 6. So based on the values we are passing, it is going to call the corresponding constructor. Then R1 dot area. What is R1 here? Nothing was passed, default here. So R1 dot area means these values are going to be considered here. 10 into 5, 50. Then R2 dot area. One parameter we passed here. So this constructor is going to be called. Length equal to 7 and width equal to 5. 7 into 5, 35 we are going to get. R3, two values we are passing here, 4 and 6. Then it is going to calculate 4 into 6, 24. So when we run this code, so we got an error. Constructor. Okay. So constructor. Let us run this code. As you can see, 50, 35 and 24. Based on the arguments we are passing, the corresponding constructor is going to be called, so that we are getting 50, 35 and 24. So when we come to the usage of inheritance, how the inheritance is going to be used in the case of the constructor. So in inheritance, a subclass constructor implicitly or explicitly calls the constructor of that particular superclass. Also call the parameterized constructor using the superclass. So like this, we can have the inheritance. Instead of accessing with the help of the object, we can also access the method with the help of method called super constructor, superclass. So with the help of superclass, we are going to access the members here. So a subclass constructor or the child class constructor calls the constructor from the superclass by using the superclass. We have a built-in keyword called super, and with the help of superclass, we are going to call the members of that parent class. So if we take the example, I am using animal here, and the method name is also animal. We can call this as a default constructor, and the class dog extends animal. So I'm writing another class called dog, which is extending the properties of animal. That means you are using inheritance concept here. Then simply we are calling super here. That means, so whatever the parent class we have, that parent class constructor is going to be called. Then we also printed some message here, system.out.println dog created. So main class, then dog d is equal to new dog. So when the object is created for the class called dog, for this class, we created an object here, which is inheriting the properties of animal also. So when this object is created, this constructor is going to be called here default constructor. Inside the default constructor, we have used called super here, so that this method is going to be called, this constructor is going to be called. Then after system.out.println dog created. So let us see when we run this code. As you can see, animal created, dog created. To represent the important fields, in that case, we are going to use the constructor. So that means always initialize the important fields in the constructor and use the constructor overloading to provide multiple ways to create an object here. You can use this keyword, we'll discuss in the next video. We can use this keyword to call the constructor from the another, and we can also use the superclass to call the superclass constructors. So that's all for now. Okay. Just before leaving, just I want to post three questions here. You can answer and you can post the answers in the description. If apart from this, if we have any queries, you can comment on me so that I'll try to reply. So these questions will use to just measure the understanding level from this session. So the question number one is, can the constructor have the return type? Simply say yes or no. What happens if you don't write any constructor? What is going to be happen that you need to answer? Can you overload the constructor? Say yes or no. So I hope everybody will post the answers in the description. I think you have learned everything about the constructors in Java, like default, parameterized, and copy constructor, overloading, and how they work with inheritance. So that's all for now. If you have any queries, comment on me so that I'll try to reply. Thank you. All the best.